people are worried about a strike. Well, record attrition numbers are probably going to hurt the industry and hurt the economy far worse than any labor strike would.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Paul Lindsey is a railroad worker, a member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, a Teamsters affiliate, and on the steering committee of Railroad Workers United, an inter-union cross-craft solidarity caucus of railroad labor. Something that Railroad Workers United has been pushing is for the government to just take over the rails. If we're gonna, if we as a society are going to allow these monopolies to exist, if we're gonna be the ones that are gonna be footed with the bill whenever there is a need to bail out this industry, we should just own it. It should just be ours. It should be the public's, like it is in other countries. And so talk to us about the benefits to society and to y'all that public ownership would bring. And why is it that y'all are pushing this as a long-term solution to these issues of these companies running the show?
So. That's a topic that unfortunately people hear it and they automatically make assumptions. We're not suggesting that we just need to have a giant freight Amtrak company that controls everything. That's not what we're suggesting at all. What we're suggesting is aligning ourselves more aligned with what the rest of the developed world is doing, and that's that the rails themselves, the infrastructure, is owned and dispatched by some sort of government agency, and private companies can pay to use the track. I mean, that's what we do with the highways, with the interstate highways. They are owned and maintained and everything, and there's open access, so there's competition. We don't have much of a competition problem in the trucking industry. We sure do with the rail industry. So the reason why we've kind of come to this conclusion is watching our industry have zero effective investment in modern technology, in electrification, in things that we need for the future to have a functional, growing, productive rail industry, which is vitally important to the United States economy. Instead, they buy back their own shares. I mean, for the last over a decade, every single year, the railroads have spent far more on share buybacks, and then on top of that, dividends, than they have on any sort of investment or improvement in the railroad. They have no intention on really investing in the growth of the industry. They have been shrinking the industry because they want the most profitable captive shipper traffic they can. They drive all the other traffic off onto the highways. So every time the railroad drives away a customer intentionally and drives them to trucks because, well, we want to make more money, and they do. They keep the highest paying shippers. They drive these truckloads onto our government-funded highways. So it's almost like an externality. We're paying for their record share buybacks and dividends and record profitability every quarter by government-subsidized highways. So the idea is to bring all of the railroads under the same umbrella, and these private railroads, they can operate and pay to use the track, just like trucks pay to use the interstate. There's nothing wrong with that. That is the idea: is public ownership of the rail, so that we can grow our system and electrify it and expand it, and use and compare the budgets of the highway system as well as the rail system when we make our transportation decisions in this country. And I don't think that's a very radical idea at all.
No.
Right.
One final thing I'll add to that as well is before I turned over there, is that in 1917, I believe it was, we actually nationalized the U.S. rail system during World War I, because the railroads back then were fighting and bickering over profits and competition and everything, and they weren't investing in growth, and there was a shortage of locomotives and a shortage of cars, and they couldn't move the freight for the war effort. And we nationalized the railroad for a period of about 3 years. And during that time, the industry grew exponentially and got new locomotives and new equipment and new infrastructure. And then at the end of that, there was a plan to potentially make it a permanent thing, but for various reasons it didn't happen, and it went back to private ownership. We've done it before, and I would say we do have a war to fight. I mean, if you guys want to reduce carbon, electrification of the railroads is really the way to do it. I mean, not these expensive batteries and going and mining lithium out of the ground and cobalt and everything. You electrify the railroads. That's where you should be starting.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Paul, I think that's this is all really great, and you definitely edified me about y'all's stance on public ownership of the rails. I thought that it was more of a having a giant national Amtrak kind of thing for the rails, but and so even though this is a more modest proposal, it makes a lot of sense. I think It makes a lot of sense to just basically bring the rails in line with what we do with the highways, and so I appreciate you laying that out for us. And was there anything else that you thought was that you feel is important to let people know on this on this issue of the rail dispute coming up?
Just let people know that if regardless of how this turns out, regardless of even if there were a strike for a few days, if the Congress forces back to work, regardless of how this ends, if we have a bad contract, there are people lining up in droves, even people with many, many years of service that are leaving the industry. And people are worried about a strike. Well, record attrition numbers are probably going to hurt the industry and hurt the economy far worse than any labor strike would. So that's
Right.
really what you're focused on, is growing the industry and keeping certified, highly trained people that operate their trains and that know every inch of their territory, and keeping them from leaving.
Right. So I appreciate that, Paul. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I did want to ask you this, and I had been aware of this before, but I wasn't thinking of it for this interview, and so I know that you didn't come prepared to talk about this, but Braxton Wright mentioned this in our chat, and he's a coal miner here in Alabama. Is one of them been on strike for over 600 days, and he mentioned that CSX has been hauling scab coal from Warrior Met, and I know that CSX is one of the union rail lines, rail companies, and so has there not been any conversation among the rail unions to stop, to honor the picket line in that instance, and to stop transporting this scab coal for Warrior Met here in Alabama?
So as far as that's concerned, the railroads themselves, they're a common carrier. So according to federal law, they can't refuse the coal. They can't refuse products because they are a common carrier. I've never personally heard about this issue. It doesn't surprise me. I'd never heard of it. Trying to keep up on national issues.
Right.
But another thing as well is a lot of these factories, a lot of these refineries refineries and mines and everything, a lot of them have their own switching locomotives that they use to build some of these trains. And a lot of times the trains will be, I don't know the configuration of this one, but the train will be set up, prepared, and ready to go. And the train crew just climbs on it. But obviously, if there was a picket line in front of the train, I don't know any of my coworkers that would cross the picket line. They're not crossing the picket line. They're just getting. And
y'all
on
have
the train.
in your contracts, y'all have in your contracts the ability to honor picket lines, right? Because I mean, it's something that I see all the time is that, if just one of these unions, even one of the smaller ones, go on strike, it would trigger a national rail strike because the others would honor those picket lines. So is that like any picket line?
Yes. So if the carmen were on strike, or the conductors voted down the contract, and really ours should have been voted down as engineers as well. It was such a slim margin. But yes, any picket line, we're not going to cross the picket line, and I don't know of any of my coworkers that would willingly cross a picket line setup. It's not going to happen. So yes, they need to solve the labor dispute across the entire industry with all the unions. Because if there's a picket line, none of us are going to work.
Right. Which union represents CSX folks?
It would be the same with the other railroads, depending on what craft.
They'd have
they're in.
different crafts. Okay, I
Yes,
see.
as far as conductors and engineers, it'd be the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers for engineers, and then the SMART, sheet metal and rail transportation workers that represent the conductors. There's a whole bunch of different unions depending on the crafts, but those two are the biggest, followed by the Brotherhood of Maintenance Away Employees, I believe, is the next largest. And,
Well, yeah, if you wouldn't mind letting us know if there's been any conversations about that, because I know that something that some of these miners down here have had an issue with, about, as conversations about this rail strike have come up, they have felt really conflicted about, like, how, about offering their support, or being very vocal about offering their support, because of the fact that these like, quote unquote, union railroad companies are transporting their coal and really undercutting their position. So I know that they would really appreciate any support that y'all could give them from the Railroad Workers United, or anything that y'all could do inside your unions. So
I would say, just from an observation point, being an engineer, if I were to see a picket line standing in the tracks in front of the locomotive, I'm not getting on. I'll call the railroad and say, there's a picket line I'm not crossing. I don't think anyone's tried that, and I'm not suggesting anything, but I'm just saying, personally, I wouldn't cross a picket line if there was a picket line that's standing out there in front of the locomotive where I get on. But if there's no picket, they can't. There's nothing suggesting that there's a picket line. If they're just picketing the coal plant and not people picking up their coal, the equipment being used to use it, then how are we to know there's a picket line? So,
and how are you to know that coal is coming from Warrior Met, as opposed to any, the Green Mountain or Peabody mines or whatever? Yeah. So, okay.
So there's
we're
opportunities.
Just getting on a train is all we're doing. Yeah.
I think there's opportunities for some dialogue then, moving forward. And I just again want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank you
after working a long night too.
Yeah,
right?
man.
Yeah.
Really, that means a lot. The fact that you have a dedication to your brothers and sisters, that you'd be willing to come on a show like ours after working a long shift just to spread the word. So thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for, railroad workers. Y'all are the backbone of the country. You deserve what you're asking for and so much more. And we're going to do anything we can to keep the pressure up and spread the word. And just wishing y'all love and solidarity in the fights ahead.
Awesome. Well, take care and hope to see you again.
Absolutely.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.